If this were to be taken literally, Michael would have a bit of a bone fetish, I fear. Oh, look at this nice clean toothbrush in the toothbrush holder. I should stick it up my butt. Hello. Today I want to talk about 3 new authors that I just checked out recently. All 3 of these books are short story compilations. One of them in particular I am extremely excited about reading again, and that is where I'm going to start. So first up, we have Love is a Crematorium and Other Tales by Mercedes M. Yardley. From this collection, I read 3 stories. The first one that I read is called The Making of Asylum Ophelia. This story is about a young girl named Ophelia who is raised by her mother, Bridget. Bridget has a vision in her mind of what type of person Ophelia is going to be, the type of life that she's going to live. Bridget is obsessed with romanticizing Ophelia's existence. She named her very specifically after a character from Hamlet. Apparently, it's a somewhat sad, romanticized character within that story. A little bit of this bleeding into something that you actually do see a bit in day-to-day life, which is that this little girl who wants to wear Wonder Woman t-shirts and play with colorful toys, but her mother does not appreciate that aesthetic. So she wants her to at all times be dressed in a flowy white nightgown so that she can run through the halls and be whimsy, I guess. Things that are otherwise good but taken too far become kind of toxic. So this is sort of like toxic whimsy. Always wear white nightgowns, preferably barefoot so she can run barefoot through the moor. The mother, Bridget, is very specific about all of these rules only applying to Ophelia. This romanticized version of existence that she's imposing on her daughter, she does not believe she gets to have. It's not that she doesn't have to do it. She doesn't get to have it because she's not an Ophelia, she's just a Bridget. So a Bridget doesn't get to braid fresh flowers into her hair, and Ophelia gets to do that. She just has this idea in her head that certain things are not meant for her. I mean, it's a little bit more complex than just her name, but she does place a lot of value on that. I think it's supposed to be representative of who you are supposed to be. What would other people think hearing the name Ophelia versus hearing the name Bridget? What sort of image does that conjure in your mind? And so she believes that this narrative must be followed. She imposes that on Ophelia to the point where she straight up says to her daughter that she will not get to live a long life because it is imperative that she dies at her physical peak. When she is at her most beautiful is when she has to tragically perish, and that her mother, Bridget, will very aesthetically grieve for her. This is written so beautifully. The story itself is somewhat romanticized, even though it makes it very clear that Ophelia is a victim of Bridget's lunacy, but it's all she knows. I won't spoil the ending of the short story. I'll just say that there's so much here about living vicariously through others. Certain things aren't for you, and that assumption that other people would be lucky to have the things that you want, that inability to see that not everyone would want the same things as you, and that it wouldn't be a prize for them to live your dream life. Most people would not want their entire life to be scripted around playing this character. The importance of the name Ophelia and its connection to Hamlet. Ashamedly, I admit, I've never seen an adaptation of Hamlet or read it. So I'm a bit curious because I want to know who Ophelia is in Hamlet and what the significance of her character is, and how that also would affect my perspective of this story. The necessity for this person to have a bit of a melancholy to them in order to fit the narrative. A normal, healthy mother would not want her child to be sad all the time. But yeah, so that was my first introduction to this author. I was quite intrigued right off the bat. And then next I read Water Thy Bones. We have two main characters. We have Michael Harrison, who is just sort of a dude who, in a literal sense within the book or the story, he has this affection for bones, like actual human bones, and he romanticizes the idea of ridding the flesh and the muscle and the sinew, getting through all of that to get to the pureness of the framework of just pure, clean, white bones, and that he sees immense beauty in bones. And then you have this character, Nickley. Nickley is this absolutely stunning woman. Instead of pretty privilege, it almost kind of works against her to the point where it's almost like being a celebrity. Sometimes you just want to go out and not be noticed, and she can't really do that because she just has like this face card, you know? She's going through life feeling a bit disgruntled, feeling unfulfilled, lonely, and then she meets Michael. Here we're getting a bit into the metaphor of him seeing past the outer shell and appreciating what's underneath. It's not a difficult metaphor to see or understand, but the way that it's written, once again, is gorgeous. Some beautiful visuals in this. It's a bit surreal at times. It's really hard because like I want to tell you, but I don't want to spoil. It's hard not to spoil short stories. When she understands, he appreciates the framework and not just the decoration on the outside. She wants to show him. She wants him to see the inside because she knows he'll actually appreciate it. And she feels very loved and at peace for the first time in her life. It does get into some touchy subjects regarding self-harm and whatnot. This metaphor of showing the inside as being beautiful but also disturbing, that it's not just one-dimensional. Trying to assess inner beauty is much more complicated than trying to assess outer beauty. Her insides that he loves, the bones that he loves, are not portrayed as perfect. They're portrayed as beautiful but disturbing and graphic. There's a haunting quality to this. And so we are 2 for 2, entering into our third story. And I thought I was absolutely stoked reading this book. I was enjoying it so much. And then I got to the third story, and oh my gosh, this third story absolutely wrecked me. It absolutely, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I, of course, read the title story, Love is a Crematorium. And this is a little bit longer. The other ones were, I think, between 10 to 20 pages. This one was like 50 or 60, I think. So this was a little bit longer in comparison. So we have this very young teenage couple, a girl named Joy and a boy named Kelly. Joy is a victim of abuse by her father. And it gets to the point where she really truly believes that he's gonna kill her. That she truly cannot take it anymore. She cannot risk staying at her house. And so she runs to Kelly and she tells him that she has to leave, that she can't stay there anymore. And she asks him to go with her because she's scared and she doesn't want to be alone. Kelly has a good, loving family, but it's young love, and he loves Joy, and he doesn't want to be joyless. So he makes the decision to leave a note for his family, and then he goes with her. And they really do not have much of a plan. They are just getting in the car that they stole from her father, and they're going to drive until they run out of gas, and then sell the car and just hitchhike and see how far away they can get and try to start a life somewhere else. And so this young couple, with high hopes, thinking that they're just gonna end up somewhere and they'll be able to get work, and they're dreaming about the sort of life they're going to build together, and they're so in love, and one way or another they're going to figure it out. There's all of these examples. Like I was truly blown away how much the author Mercedes was able to show and not tell. She showed example after example of how genuine this love and affection for each other was. It's young love, but it's not fleeting. That there really is a deep bond between Joy and Kelly. And she shows that. She shows example after example of how strongly they feel about each other. They end up in a big city, but they struggle trying to find work because they're young, and obviously the longer that they're homeless, the harder it becomes to try to find work because they don't have clean clothes, they don't have any sort of resume, they don't have anything that they need to really be set up for success trying to get work. And so they are on the streets, but they're together. But eventually things just get increasingly more and more difficult, and Mercedes has to resort to some unpleasant things so that they can eat. Their bond and their relationship is strained. They're still holding out hope and fighting for things to get better, but they don't really know how. Eventually, one thing leads to another. Kelly does call home. He finds out that his father is in the hospital, not doing well. Joy refuses to go back because she's scared that even just being in town, that her father will find her. They scrounge up the money so Kelly can go home to see his father before he passes away, with the promise that he will come back for her. I'll leave it at that. But this book, I cried so hard. I cried so hard, and then I pulled myself together, and then I cried again. You realize that just like this couple, that you are hoping against all odds that things are going to work out for them. There's such fragility and tenderness between them, such harsh circumstances leading them to this point. The guilt and the shame that they both experience. Kelly, he looks at Joy and he knows how hard her life was, and he knows why she had to leave, and he feels such immense guilt over what she's had to do in order to try to keep them both alive, and his shame over not protecting her the way that he thought he could, and for her guilt and shame over the fact that they're homeless and hungry and that he didn't need to be there. He had a good family, he had a promising life, and that she asked him to go with her. He's stuck in the gutter with her. There's so much pain for the suffering that they feel that they've put each other through, and there's so much understanding about how it got to this point. This is going to seem like a very bold comparison, but truly, for me, the despair that I felt reading this, the thing that came to mind was when I watched Grave of the Fireflies. If you've ever seen that, it's an anime. It's iconically known to be heart-wrenching. And that popped into my head when I was reading this. This absolutely sold me on this author. I thought I was enjoying the other two, but this one, I felt this so deeply that I immediately went onto the Kindle app on my phone and I looked up other stories by this author because I'm like, I need to read more from this author. It's not really horror, but it's dark themes. It's very melancholy. I'm very excited to read the other stories in this collection. I am very excited to read this author again. Shout out to her. Shout out to Mercedes M. Yardley. My goodness. Next up, we have The Ettiquette of Booby Trap. I just bit my cheek. Next up, we have The Ettiquette of Booby Traps by John Boden. This, we are going with very different vibes than the previous collection. So I also read 3 stories. Well, technically 4, but one of them is very, very short stories. First up, we have The Recluse. And this is about a man who works in an office. There is some unrequited love between him and his female coworker. It seems as though he is obsessed with her from afar, but not that she doesn't know he exists, just that she doesn't have much affection for him. His inner dialogue is talking about the darkness within. And it's something where I, as the reader, was under the impression that this was a metaphor. He refers to black tentacles, and that's something that I thought was referring to just his inner darkness, the monster within and whatnot. But it turns out she comes into work and he tries to approach her. He just looks at her and he sees her face kind of drop. Her smile kind of falters a little bit once she realizes that it's him approaching her. And it's one of those things that's very subtle. She's not going out of her way to try to be rude. It's just a unconscious reaction. A clear indication that she does not have feelings of affection for this man. And it is at that point that she is devoured by the ugliness within. I thought this was very simple but effective. The surreal kind of visual of this tentacled creature blackness that's reaching out from inside of you and it's staining everything around it that, gets in its wake. That's a powerful visual. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the visualization. Next up, we have The Claim. And this is a bit more of a Western type vibe. So we have our character Dandridge. Cowboy guy walks into a saloon. Did I sound like John Wayne? Sorry. He walked into a saloon and he turns out to be a bit of a sketchy character who is good at pretending not to be sketchy. He's like a con man. He's good at convincing people to give him the benefit of the doubt. He can be very charming and whatnot, but then he screws them over. That type of character. He walks into the saloon. He meets just this wiry, freaky little guy. It's not really explained exactly why Ren is so nervous. To me, it wasn't clear if he was intended to be perhaps a little bit slow or if he's just nervous because life is hard. He's written in a way where you kind of picture somebody who's young. So it could just be he's an awkward teenager. I'm really not quite sure. But Dandridge, or Lucas, meets Ren. Ren is basically offering him some work through the guy that hires him. Micah is a dude who has this hole in the ground where they're digging gold, right? And he hires Ren and other passerbys to dig up some gold and shares the profits with them for their labor. So Lucas goes there. He ends up discovering that Micah has these sacks of goods, and he comes up with a plan to try to steal them and flee instead of actually just doing good honest work as we would expect, because we've already established he is a sketchy man. And I guess I'll just say that it does not go according to plan. Like the last one, it's kind of simple, but it's written in a way that's very fun to read. I thought it was interesting because with the events that transpire, it's not really 100% clear if it is an example of karma or if it's kind of the opposite of karma, where this series of events would have happened regardless of who stopped, what their intentions were. This was bound to happen. And so it's kind of interesting how, depending on what lens you view the world through, you would interpret this very differently. That was fun. I enjoyed it. This... I'm embarrassed. Okay. But just a very tiny little thing called In the Morning, which I only read because I stumbled upon and I saw how short it was, so I was like, okay, why not? So this will be spoiled because it's literally like a paragraph. It's literally just a wall of tongues. It's just a wall of tongues, and this dude, why does he have a wall of tongues? We'll never know. He has this wall of tongues, and so he's like flicking food at them with like a spoon. He's like flicking it, and they're all like, hell yeah, right? The tongues, Yeah. And then it literally just says, oh, after he's done with that, then he gets up and walks over to the wall and starts to unzip his pants. And that's the end. And you know why, but for some reason, I just felt the need to comment on this because, admittedly, I'm not great at anticipating endings. I'm not great at guessing endings. It seems so obvious in hindsight, like, oh, well, if you were a man and you had a wall of tongues, I was just so taken aback. I thought it was gross. I thought the food was gross, and I just somehow didn't expect or anticipate. But yeah, again, dare I say, simple but effective. Last up by this author, we have Intruder. This is about a man who likes to break into people's houses, but he also has severe OCD. He has his methods. Why is he breaking in? Not to steal things, just to wreak havoc. He sees things that in his mind are not correct. He doesn't like the way that the magazines are stacked up on the coffee table. He doesn't like the fact that the owner of the house, the woman, left a dirty dish next to the sink instead of washing it right away. She's upstairs sleeping or whatever. He breaks in and he fixes these things, washes the dish, fixes the magazines on the coffee table, but then also proceeds to see things that one would argue are correct, and then he undoes that. He starts switching things, like he puts sugar in the salt container and salt in the sugar container. If you have that type of OCD with organization and whatnot, that would seem to be like your worst nightmare, one would think. But this person is an agent of chaos. And so he fixes what is wrong and unfixes what is right and makes things gross and weird. He's not even trying to hurt the owner of the house. He's just being weird. The thing that I thought was interesting about this was the balance between the chaos and the control. That he doesn't mind the chaos as much when he's in control of what it is. He's a victim of impulses, so he feels the need to plan. Maybe that's what it is. He is a victim of his own impulses. So to counteract that, he plans and organizes chaos to balance himself out or something, or is like a you to his own mental illness. I thought it was really interesting. I can't say that this had the same emotional turmoil to me that the last one did, but sometimes that's not what you want. Sometimes you just want something that is interesting and weird and fun to read, and this definitely was. I'm also very interested to read the rest of this collection because I've only read the 4 so far. Okay, and last up we have Happy Bunny and Other Mischiefs by Rebecca Grandsen. Full transparency, this author did reach out to me and sent me a free PDF of this book to review. Now, I didn't read all of the stories. I just picked a handful like I did with the others. Now, I read 3 stories. I liked 2 of them. One was a bit of a miss for me, so I think I'll leave the one that just wasn't really my cup of tea for the very end. First up, we have Ettiquette and the Mod Hex from Hell. I mean, with a title like that, if I'm going through a list of story titles and I see a title like that, of course that's going to be one of the ones. In this story, we have this woman who is just out and about. She's at a coffee shop or some kind of sit-down place. And this man sees her and he's like, hey, do you want this game console? And like any normal person, she's highly suspect, right? Because why? He's trying to sell it for a cheap price and she's assuming something's wrong with it. She's like not really interested. He's very persistent and it gets to the point where he basically just shoves it into her arms and then walks away. She just sort of concedes at that point and she takes the console home. She finds that there is a game called Sea of Glass on there. And she decides to check it out, and it immediately tells her that she needs to make an avatar. It is imperative that this avatar resembles a person or an animal that she knows in real life, and that she has to give them attributes that she would not mind them having. in real life. Given the fact that we know we're reading some kind of weird little story, your mind goes to, oh no, this is going to transform the person or the animal, right? Like that was my thought reading it. But of course, this character doesn't know what type of story she's in, right? So she's like, well, I'm going to do my cat. She's kind of playing off of real characteristics that the cat has. Instead of just sharp claws, the claws burn like fire, and instead of her cat just having bad breath, it's the type of breath that causes people to form boils and lesions on their face. That like their skin reacts to how bad the cat's breath is. The final coup de trois? That's not right. And just for shits and giggles, basically that the cat is sassy. When it wins a battle, it's going to say, fuck it. It's as anticipated. These things do start to affect her actual cat. And her trying to figure out how this is happening. She tracks down the man who gave her the console and tries to see if she can save her cat from these badass new skills that the cat has developed. I liked this story. I thought the ending was very funny. Next up, I did read the title story from the book, Happy Bunny. So this, oh my goodness, if you've ever seen Donnie Darko, this is a bit of a fever dream. See, these stories, I wouldn't even know how to categorize, but this is more weird than horror. That's true of all of these, actually, but I like weird. So this is about an actual, well, that's the thing, I don't know. At points, I think we're talking about an actual bunny, but then at other points it says that it is a bunny costumed man, like out of Donnie Darko. There are also portals involved where the Happy Bunny jumps through the portal, and he has kind of these two worlds. The Happy Bunny has the home base, which basically they go and with their little bunny mitt, they try to journal about their experiences on the other side of the portal. It's almost like an existential crisis where the bunny doesn't remember life before, and it doesn't really remember how this all started, but it's just kind of going through the day-to-day motions of jumping through this portal and coming back. But what happens when he jumps through the portal is that the bunny is still a bunny, but also an actor in like movies and stuff. There was a line, Happy Bunny jumped through the portal and ran into the leader of a street gang that he'd ripped off in the previous episode. And so when I read that, that made me laugh because the idea of a bunny ripping off the leader of a street gang was funny to me, but then it was also funny to think that the leader of the street gang was also a bunny, but that doesn't but that doesn't appear to be the case. Okay, so the bunny jumps through the portal, acts out this scene, and then the director yells cut, and then the Happy Bunny will kind of mill around for a bit, and then the portal will appear, and then they'll have to jump through the portal to go back to the home base where they journal. This gives me the sense that this author, if I had to guess, there is a very strong possibility that this is someone who plays video games, and this is somebody who probably plays like indie games, because that's what this makes me think of. This seems like some sort of weird indie video game that you would play and you're the Happy Bunny that's like going back and forth between the home base where you like heal up or whatever, but then you have to jump, you know what I mean? Like you have to jump through the portal and do all these crazy shenanigans or whatever. This is a fever dream because at no point did I have the slightest clue what was going on. I'm still not clear because she does say that it is a bunny costumed man, but all these other bits and pieces make it seem like it's a real bunny running into the road and whatnot. It does not come across like it's a man in a bunny suit. Nothing really makes sense, so it's like nothing's real and nothing's not real. The home base, Happy Bunny can't talk, but they can talk when they jump through the portal because that's when they're acting out the scene. I'm making this sound like nonsense, but it is nonsense. I need to be clear about that. You don't know what's going on, you don't know where you're going, but you're enjoying the ride. Last up, we have Gut Punch. Gut Punch was a bit of a miss for me. This story gave me the sense that I was confused and didn't know where we were going, but I was not enjoying the ride. That was kind of the difference between this and Happy Bunny. There's an older woman who seems to be a tad off, who is kind of milling around, following sort of this group of teenagers. She frequents near their school and she mills around, but she's not trying to hurt them or being aggressive to them per se. She's not attacking them, she's not cursing at them, she's just kind of there. But they don't like that. And so they are very mean to her. And so at first, it was making me feel something, which was I hated the teenagers and I felt bad for this older woman. So the fact that it was making me feel something, I thought was rather promising. But it took a turn that just left me so perplexed because I guess all those feelings that were kind of starting to get there, they just sort of dissipated due to events. It's a short story. You're not expecting a ton of background and build up and all of that, but when the twist, the climax of the story just didn't really make me feel anything. The only character that I felt anything for was the older woman. I don't want to say it invalidated those initial feelings, but it just sort of confused them. My feelings didn't go along with the plot. They just kind of became stagnant. I guess there was just too much I didn't understand. I didn't understand why these kids were being so aggressive and mean to this older woman. And I don't understand why the older woman ultimately reacted in the way she did. And I didn't understand the twist or the reveal at the very end. I don't know. Maybe it just went over my head, which I'm always open. I'm always open to the possibility that I just didn't get it. That it just went over my head. That is always a possibility. I don't know if I just missed an absolutely crucial sentence that I just didn't process or something. I did enjoy the other two. I thought Happy Bunny was very surreal and creative and weird, and I thought Ettiquette and the Mod Hex from Hell had some humor in it that I enjoyed. So yeah, those were the three new authors that I checked out. There's something so fun and freeing about just seeing a name that you've never seen before and a book with a cool cover and just kind of jumping in. Especially with short stories, you're not committing to a 300-page novel that doesn't pick up until the halfway point. You know what I mean? You're committing to 25 pages. And if they don't hook you right away, you can try another one or you can just cut your losses. And it's not this big time commitment. All three of these had their highlights and all three were fun, but I am particularly excited to read Mercedes Yardley again. I don't know when, but I am 100% sure that you will be hearing that name again on this channel. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. Or seen an adaptation. I've never seen an oh my gosh. I've never seen an oh